Today is March the 5th of 2023, and today we are here with Dean Crump, who's running for City Council, Amarillo City Council, Place 1. Dean, welcome.
Well, thanks for having me, Dan. I appreciate it.
Why are you running for the Place 1 City Council?
All the question. Well, I think, there's been a lot of contentiousness, I guess, in the last few years, and I really feel like with my background and in business and my love for Amarillo and I've always wanted to do my civic duty, and so I felt like now was the time. I felt like I could really help our city get financially, fiscally responsible, and that's my goal.
So, what's your background?
My background, I worked for a data software company called Western Data. I don't know if you remember that company. It's been around a long time. It was back in the early 80s, 82. I was working there while I was going to WT at Amarillo College, depends on which semester. And I was a computer operator, and then I was promoted to a customer service sales implementation type person with another company. And so I took that job, and they moved me to Dallas for 8 months. And me and my wife kind of had a struggle with her working for American Airlines and couldn't get transferred. They laid off 4,000 people the day that I moved to Dallas to take a job with EDS, Ross Perot's company. And we were doing bank data processing with them too. So we had to make a choice because she wasn't getting transferred, and my daughter was 1 year old. We had her birthday, and the next day I left for Dallas to work for EDS. And so we spent 8 months kind of apart. Luckily, she worked for American Airlines, and we got to fly back and forth a lot. But so I was in charge of back when the savings and loans were all failing. Resolution Trust was taking over all the savings and loans. I was in charge of a large group of people that would actually go into the failing banks and convert all of their data to over to the EDS systems. So to move back to Amarillo, we had a choice. She was either going to move to Dallas one way or another, or I was going to move back to Amarillo, and we really didn't like Dallas. I liked visiting Dallas, but I didn't like living in Dallas. It's pretty long, 8 months. So we moved back because I got a job at Corporate Systems, which was kind of a similar company, data processing, but it was more on the insurance side, insurance and risk management and claims management. So I got an account manager job with them, and we moved back to Amarillo, and I worked for them for 16 years in leadership positions. I was in charge of about half of Corporate Systems budget, and so managed about 45 people, and it was my job to build the budgets. It was my job to manage the expenses. It was my job to bring in the revenue. So from that, after 16 years, I left and went to start my own business in real estate. So similar to you, I bought about 50 rent houses and some commercial property and started doing a bunch of real estate management and of my own property. And so that's me and my brother-in-law, Kelvin Allen, and my sister Cindy. We went into business together with Arrowhead Real Estate. I've since built a pretty good portfolio of real estate with that, and do some leases with the BSA, and now just manage that. And I started a biotech company, totally different than what I've ever done. But we have a company that actually takes amniotic tissue from horses, and we make wound care products for animals. So that's one of my other, I guess, now passions. That's been about 6 or 7 years.
It's interesting.
So I feel like that experience with managing people, with all kinds of different business experiences, with budgets, with sales, with service, with I think that I feel like I've had enough experience to qualify me to at least do my part.
So what is your main priorities if you get elected that you want to see implemented at the city?
the main priority for me is obviously to keep taxes low. And to do that, I think that I want to take the budget like I've done many times in the past with my companies and the companies I've worked for, the companies that I have. And I think the most important thing about those companies is managing that expense, making sure that that budget is appropriated, the funds are appropriated in the right places, the places that we need, first responders, police, fire, parks, whatever the case may be. I want to manage the budget and move the money to where it makes the most sense.
Focus on the basics.
The basics. That's what our job is. I mean, we're Central City Services. We've had problems with our trash, obviously. Those type services have a problem for a reason. The trash deal had a problem for a reason. We had to raise the rates of pay for $3 to get the people to do that. So obviously we didn't have the money appropriated there to do that. We had to get it from somewhere. So I think there's a lot of room in what I've seen. I've dissected the budget fairly good so far. I'm still working on it. That thing is 3 inches thick, so I'm working through that. But that's the first thing the city council has to do is approve the new budget. And I'm going to do my part at least to make that work for the city, to make sure the Central City Services are good.
Well, it looks to me like Amarillo, everybody thinks Amarillo's growing, but the city of Amarillo is not.
Correct. That's a true statement.
So
we're kind of limited on our borders, but
well, because they're not looking ahead and providing services to direct the direction of the development.
Correct.
To me, one thing the cities can do is provide utilities. But if they don't reach out with water, especially water, ideally water and sewer, then people are going to go out into the rural areas and do 1 acre plus tracts where they can put a well and septic.
Which they have.
Which is what's happening. But then you've got all those penetrations into your aquifer. Mm-hmm. To me, it would be better for them. And I've had conversations with the city, but it falls on deaf ears. I'm like, y'all could be raising all this revenue because running a water line is cheap. Mm-hmm. Sewer is not so cheap. Correct. Water is not difficult. You stick a meter on there, and people prefer that because they don't want to have to mess with a well. Septic is a non-issue, but wells, a lot of people just they didn't grow up with wells, and they don't know how they work, and they don't know what to do if it goes out, and they don't know how a pressure switch works or a pressure tank. But I was told, well, we would have to amend our city charter, so we can't do it. My thought is, why don't you amend the city charter? It's not that hard. It's 3 votes.
No, it's not that hard, and
But that's the attitude that
right.
I think people want to see changed. Get creative.
Get creative and be easy to work with. I mean, our Economic Development Corp has done a great job of bringing business to this community. Over $3 billion, and another one announced last week. But if we're going to be easy to work with and grow organically with that, which in turn grows the tax revenue, mm-hmm. keeping taxes low, then we do have to be easy to work with and be forward-thinking in how we are going to grow. So we do have some infrastructure issues that need attention too. We've got quite a few aging water lines and sewer lines, that some of them in the 7,500 years old, that probably need some attention as well. But in the meantime, we've got to grow our infrastructure to support what's coming. And I think it's coming.
So what is the new thing they announced last week?
It had to do with, I don't know exactly what the company is, but it has to do with they're trying to make Amarillo a central hub for all things food, beef, vegetables, organically grown vegetables, kind of farm to table type things. Mm-hmm. And I forget the company that's coming to town, but that's kind of what it's.
So it's a distribution.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's good.
Yeah, it is good, and I understand there's way more coming. So.
Well, it's my understanding Walmart wanted to put their distribution center here years ago. And
yeah, we failed.
City leaders wouldn't do it.
failed them.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which makes total sense being on I-40 and I-27 in the center of the country.
Yeah.
Instead, they pushed it down to Plainview.
Yeah. That I-27 corridor is coming. I mean, maybe not in my lifetime, but it's coming. And this is going to be a central hub of the middle of the United States with two major interstates running right crisscrossing right in the middle of Amarillo. So we've got to be prepared for that.
Well, when you reach a certain size, like we reached 200,000, actually more when you look at the surrounding area, there's just something that happens internally.
Mm-hmm.
So you start getting that internal growth at roughly 5-6% a year, just internally.
Sure.
And the fact is, when that happens, growth is going to come. So you can either prepare for it or you can get run over by it.
That's a good way to
So we need people on our council that have some experience and some foresight that can plan ahead.
Right.
And prepare for things.
Well, in my experience with the commercial development stuff, I have a shopping center. So just that in and of itself, I don't get the bigger box tenants wanting to come to my shopping center, or most shopping centers really. I mean, Perry's done that big one out on Soncy and having a hard time filling it with those big box type shopping center or tenants. And it's because we're not on the radar. We're on the radar now that we're hitting that 200,000 mark. We're about to hit a stride, I think. Mm-hmm. And things will start changing more rapidly than they have. Typically Amarillo grows a mile every 20 years. Well, that seems awfully slow, but I think that pace is going to pick up dramatically once we hit, which we have hit, 200,000 people. And that's going to be even bigger in 5 years with all the things that are coming to town. We better be prepared for it. That's the bottom line.
I was trying to research something the other night, and I stumbled across a deal from UT San Antonio.
Yeah.
Where they're projecting out population growth over the next 30 years in all the counties across Texas. And what it showed was that Potter County was going to shrink, but Randall County is going to double.
Why would Potter County shrink? That seems odd, but I get Randall County doubling. But
well, that's the question.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't necessarily know. Well, because they're allowing growth in Randall County, and Potter has very little. Bushland has some.
Yeah.
But there's no infrastructure up there.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
Yeah, we can't even get Coulter to close the gap between the hospital district and the Woodlands area. There's a lot of growth out there.
Well, I think there could be.
Residentially,
yeah. But the city has to work with developers to try to provide services. And if they're not willing to provide them and make the developer pay for it, then the cost that's what's driving the cost of building up, is things like that.
Sure.
So people want to know why it costs so much to build a house. They can go outside the city limits, and it's so much cheaper.
Sure. And get more acreage.
Exactly.
Yeah. That's true.
So you can't get any density.
Yeah.
And a lot of it's politics, and there's just not people are going to go where people want them to go. You're not going to go to a party if you're not invited, right?
That's true. That's true.
So I think there's some of that.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. There is some of that.
Well, it's kind of like the convention center. Everybody thinks we need a new convention center, but it's not going to solve the problem, because it's not what I've been told is it's because of the corruption in our ticket sales, where they were stealing the money. None of the big acts are going to come to Amarillo.
No, they're not,
because of the corruption.
I haven't heard that. I'd like to find out more about that.
That's what I've been told.
Okay.
And they got caught. And so when one of those big acts gets screwed over, the word gets out quick.
Sure.
And you get blackballed.
Absolutely. I've spent a little time in the music business. I understand that a little bit. Yeah. But That's not good.
Right. But we all think it's because of our facility. I don't think it has anything to do with the facility. They're actually going to go where they're going to sell tickets.
That's the bottom line.
They'll figure out how to get them in.
That's the bottom line.
Yeah.
Yeah. That is true. Well, I don't think that's, to me, that's, the voters spoke on that. So we'll just, if that comes up again, we'll just have to look at it. We'll start over. See if that's something
So
we
do
can
you
or
think
should
that
do.
the council should listen to the voters, or do you think the council should do what they want regardless of what the voters think?
No, the council should listen to the voters. I was totally opposed to the way that was handled.
Yeah. Well, fortunately, we had somebody stand up and take them on and stop it.
Right.
So we should be very thankful to
I'm
Alex
thankful.
Fairley.
I'm thankful for Alex.
Yeah, for having the courage to
Yeah.
do it. Now, they got by with it on the city hall. They
Yeah.
went around to voters on that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's going to cost us, what, $40-50 million that we don't need?
Right.
Or most voters I talk to say they are perplexed as to why they're doing it.
Yeah.
And what are we going to do with the old city hall?
Well, I think I know what the plan was to tear it down and have a plan for the Civic Center.
Right.
I've heard that building is in poor shape, but I don't know.
Looks pretty
It's
good to me.
yeah,
It feels
me
pretty
too.
solid. I jump up and down on the floors, and they don't move a bit.
Yeah. So I don't know what's going to happen to it now. I don't know. I guess we'll have to decide when the new commission gets in there.
I just wonder if there's a way that the new one could be stopped
Certainly something to look at.
to save the voters the
Yeah.
money.
Sure, certainly could look at that. I wouldn't be opposed to that.
I mean, it's a lot of money that's going to hit people's pocketbooks. I mean, they haven't gotten the bill on it yet, and when they do, they're going to want to know why.
Right. Yeah, I agree.
Because they did certificate of obligations on that.
Yep.
Which is a way to go around the voters. And everybody I talk to is very upset about it.
Yeah. I've
Well-
heard the same.
When I went door to door with a couple of my precinct chairs, I mean, the people were livid. They are not happy.
Yep. I've heard a lot of the very same.
But maybe it woke people up and realized how important it is for them to vote in a city election.
I hope that's the case.
And I
hope
think
that's
it's
the case.
helped get people into our process to run for these positions. And
Yeah.
so people need to understand how important their local elections and their local representatives are, whether it's city council, county commission. To me, those are by far more important than your congressman or your senator or your president.
I agree.
And people don't pay attention to it because the media doesn't really report on it. So it just gets missed.
Right.
And they think it's not important. But I'm trying to help people understand how important it is. It's really, we got to focus on the local because that affects your daily life. What Congress does, a congressman, he's one of 535 people. He's totally, basically, just a little speck
Right.
on the beach. But your position represents a lot fewer people, so that makes you much more important.
I do believe our local government is very important. It has to be trustworthy. I want to be trustworthy and transparent. So I hope that's what I want the voters to know about me is that that's the way I'm going to be, is trustworthy and transparent, and I'm going to listen, and I'm going to go to the voters on the things that need to. I'm not going to go to the voters if we need to put a new sewer line in somewhere. That's stuff that needs to be managed at the city level. But for the most part, on the big ticket items that affect their tax rate, they need a vote. Need to be heard.
Yep. Well, a lot of people, another complaint that I hear from people is that now they have to fill out a form in order to speak at a council meeting, and they don't like the fact that it's on a Tuesday afternoon when people are at work. And now they approved that they only have to meet once every 2 weeks, 24 times a year. Would you be amenable to moving those council meetings, or maybe having the off week in an evening where the actual citizens that wanted to could show up?
Absolutely. I mean, that's what it's for. I want to make it accessible to the voters to be heard. So if that's what it takes to do that, of course.
Well, just because they said you didn't have 24 doesn't mean you can't have 48.
Sure. Yeah.
They have to have at least 24.
Right.
It's like in our party, we only have to have one a quarter, but we have a meeting every month.
Yeah.
So you can have more, just not less.
Yeah.
Another big concern I hear people talking about, maybe it's not as big an issue as it was, but it's about pets and loose animals running all over town. Have you heard any?
Oh yeah, I've heard some rumblings about that for sure. We certainly need to peel that onion and see what's the cause of that. You know, I'm sure some of it has to do with an appropriation of funds, having enough people to manage that appropriately and the facilities to manage it. So certainly on my radar.
I wondered if maybe it makes sense that people who have pets, maybe they should pay a license fee to offset that cost of animal control, because their pets are the ones causing the problem. You have a lot of responsible people, but you have a few that aren't.
Correct.
And maybe that would help weed those irresponsible people out.
It's a good idea.
And maybe offer a course on how they take care of their pet. I don't know. I'm just thinking, we have to have broker's licenses. We have to have continuing education. We have to take all these classes and pay all these fees. Plumbers do, electricians do. The only ones that really don't have to are the media and politicians. Everybody else has to have a license fee.
That's true. And to be a responsible pet owner, that's a pretty good idea. I like that. I'm going to use that if you don't mind.
No, it's your idea now.
Well, it's recorded now, so I think everybody knows it was yours.
I don't care who comes up with them. I just want problem solved.
Yeah,
I don't care who gets credit.
I don't care either. I'm open to the idea, and I'll run with it if it's a good one.
Well, I think it's something to look at, because then the people that have the pets that are paying for that service, right? If you don't have a pet, why should you pay for it?
I agree.
It's like a user fee, and I just think we should have less taxes and more. And I don't think reasonable people would have a problem with that. I'd rather do that than pay higher taxes across the board, and it'd probably save them money in the long run.
Yeah. Enforcing that would be a challenge, I would assume, but I'm sure there's a process that can be.
Yeah. Call me, I'll tell you how to do it.
Okay.
I'll figure it out.
Okay.
I'll figure it out. Not a big issue. Do you have any other proposals or solutions for the people of Amarillo?
Well, I mean, I just want them to know that, I think my experience in business and life, and my desire to, I don't have an agenda, a political agenda whatsoever. I'm not endorsed by anybody associated with any organization that has their own agenda. I just want to work hard. I'm a worker. I want to take what the city is supposed to be doing with their central city services and make sure that we're trustworthy, transparent, and spending the money wisely where it needs to be spent.
Well, as a real estate professional, do you think the city should be involved in the real estate business and leasing out commercial
No.
space?
I do not.
Well, that's what they've been trying to do, and they haven't been very
They
good
haven't
at
been
it.
very successful at it, but I don't think I don't think it's good for the government to compete with the citizens.
Right.
Do your job, which is trash, water, sewer, streets, animal control, things of that nature.
Yeah.
That's what we're here to do. The rest is up to the entrepreneurs or the people that are
Let the
willing to
market
put
work.
let the market
Yeah.
work.
All right. Well, do you have a website or anything where people can get a hold of you?
I do. Yes, it's DeanCrumpForAmarillo.com.
Well,
It's
that's
my
easy to
website.
remember.
I've got a Facebook page. I do Twitter a little bit, not much. Not very good at it, so I stay away from it.
I'm not a social media person at all. I think
And anybody's welcome to go on my personal Facebook page. I think you'll learn a lot about me, what I am, what I'm about. I've got a wife of 35 years now, and as of June, it'll be 35 years. I've got 2 daughters that I've raised here in Amarillo. They both have moved back after college, which is kind of cool.
Mhm.
So they must love Amarillo, and I want them to be here. And I think I'm very blessed that they decided to move back to Amarillo to be with us, especially now that I have a grandchild. So my granddaughter Amelia is almost 2, so I get to see her almost every day. So that's a blessing. And I want, I'm 59 years old, so I got a good quality 25 years left, but I want to leave Amarillo in a better place for Amelia than I have.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people, maybe they're from here, but they want to try to make Amarillo like someplace else instead of focusing on what makes Amarillo unique.
Yeah, I like Amarillo the way it is. I mean, you got to grow. It's going to grow, but if I wanted to I lived in Dallas. I wanted to live there, I would go back. I came back to Amarillo for a reason.
So when I came here in 94, well, maybe a little before that, when I was helping some people on some real estate transactions, I had to go downtown to meet an attorney down there. And I remember driving in, no parking meters. I thought, this is pure heaven. Walked in, did your thing, come out a couple hours later, get in your truck and drive off. That's the way life ought to be.
That's the way life ought to be.
And, why they put parking meters down, I refuse to download the app or pay. I guess they'll arrest me one of these days. But I figured out how. And then I figured out, wait a minute, there's no parking meters in front of Ginger Nelson's building or Amarillo National Bank.
Interesting.
So now I know where to park and I won't get a ticket.
Well, that is what makes Amarillo a good place to be, though. It's easy to get around most of the time. Just don't be on Coulter and I-40 around 5 o'clock.
Yeah.
When the hospital's let out. But
Well, if
Amarillo's a good place.
If I get been out of shape because I have to wait through a couple of lights, then I know it's time to go to Austin and get an attitude adjustment.
Yeah. Every time I drive to Dallas, I think, I go there because I enjoy the things that Dallas has to offer, ball games and football and baseball, which I enjoy. I get to Decatur and I get kind of excited. I'm getting to Dallas. Then every time I leave, I get to Decatur, I get a little excited again because I'm out of that.
Yeah.
I'm headed back to Amarillo. I'm headed back to a better society.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I had to go to Austin this week, and you just get there and you just cringe when you hit that traffic on I-35. And, I was going to spend a couple of days and deal with a bunch of other people down there, and I thought, no, I'm out of here. I headed north as fast as I could to get out of there.
Well, that's a prime example of organic growth that you're not prepared for.
I was down there in the 80s, during the RTC collapse down there. I watched real estate values drop 70% overnight. All these banks failing, banks calling clients of mine's notes who'd never missed a payment. It was just because they were failing. And I saw commercial properties sit empty there for 10 years without a tenant. And then in the early 90s, it started changing, and markets started coming back and got absorbed, and then it just took off.
That's when the good commercial real estate deals existed.
Yeah, if you'd have bought it in the late 80s, early 90s, but you'd have probably went broke because your holding costs were too high.
Yeah.
So nobody could afford to buy it, and no lenders would lend anybody to buy real estate, period, in Austin. They'd put you in a straitjacket and haul you to the loony bin. Because I was trying to buy rental property at the time. They wouldn't even talk to you.
Those places are having a hard time retrofitting the growth they needed to prepare for.
Well,
Austin,
you had all the environmentalists.
Austin and San Antonio.
They wouldn't let them build any highways. And it was the environmentalists that were shutting them down.
Yeah.
They're trying to get it done, but they wouldn't let them do it. So now they're paying that price.
Yeah. That's why it's a nightmare to get around there.
Yep.
When I was 14, I grew up here in Amarillo, born here, lived over on Klein by Fannin, and then I went to elementary school at Lawndale, and then went to Ridgecrest and Bonham for a couple of years. And Mom and Dad divorced. Dad went to Montana. My mom went to San Antonio. So that was my choices. So being ignorant, I didn't go to Montana. I decided to stay in Texas, even though it was about the same distance from Amarillo. But we lived in San Antonio through my high school. So I told Mom, I was mad about it, of course. I told Mom, as soon as I graduate high school, I'm going to move back to Amarillo. And that was a 14-year-old being stubborn, but I actually did that. I moved back the summer after I graduated to go to WT. I lived with my grandmother over by Fannin, same house. And but my point to that was San Antonio was 800,000 people then. Now it's 2.5 million. That's a significant growth in 40 years.
It's huge.
I don't think that Amarillo's going to do that, but I hope not.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a lot of people.
But I'm glad to be back in Amarillo.
Well, I appreciate you coming by and visiting
sir.
with us, and good luck on the campaign trail, and I'm sure we'll be seeing you at some events prior to that, at some of these forums, and so we'll be seeing you around the campaign trail.
Well, I hope so. I appreciate it. I appreciate you doing this and giving me the opportunity to tell you who I am and what I'm about, but I appreciate it.
No problem. Good luck.
Thank you.